don't know. I don't know with this hurricane what the attendance is going to be like, because a lot of our people are Central Florida people.
Okay.
But you also pull an audience in a big way, so maybe your people are going to show up. So hello, thank you for being here, Bianca.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's so exciting to be back and seeing y'all since y'all were here in Puerto Rico.
At T-Bags. And, I got to tell you, the branding, and we got to talk about the branding too, and the mission, but the branding's on point, because Nicole just DM'd me. She goes, wait, what's her first name? Because I just know This Latina Travels, and that is so on point. And you live this. And I was like, oh, it's Bianca for sure. And she's like, oh, okay. And a reminder, and Nicole, you might remember this, Bianca's the one that introduced us to Emily. Yes, Emily Torres. Yeah. And she killed it for us.
Yeah.
With videography. We were so happy for that. Big time. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh my gosh. That's right. Yeah. She was like a huge asset to our trip, almost made it all worth it. Besides obviously meeting and everybody and stuff, but being able to have a professional, and she was so sweet and so awesome.
Yeah. And she was the right balance for a videographer, where she would be she would tell you what to do, but she would be super sweet about it. Hey,
we need instructions. I'm like, hey, Grant's well, what are we going to do? I'm like, look, if the videographer's on point, she will tell us the shots, walking into the building and then walking down and she did. She was on it, and she had a vision for us. And I definitely think that's a big part of being a professional. So she was on point. Yeah.
Now, before we dive deep into your creator journey, tell us, what is This Latina Travels, and how did you land on this name?
Sure. So I guess a little bit of background before I even get into that. You gotta know a little bit about me. So I was born in Cochabamba, Bolivia, which is the heart of South America. I immigrated to this country when I was 6 months. So I'm a proud immigrant, grew up in the DMV area, which is DC, Maryland, Virginia. So I think traveling, needed to say, was embedded in me because we traveled really for survival. But, growing up, it was something that I always would dream about. I come from a family of four women, and then my mom 5, so single mom. So we didn't, grow up having trips or money to have trips. So vacations were just a dream. And it wasn't until college where I really started, road tripping and figuring out, oh, wow, all these universities in different states are all different. Why are they all so different? Because each state has something different. And so that's where really, I think my passion grew for traveling. But again, I didn't have money, so I had to find means and ways to, travel. And there are so many programs out there. And so I started traveling for free with alternative break, summer programs, spring break programs, getting into all the offices. I used to be a advisor for the Office of Diversity on my campus, and I would get gigs through that. So when I tell people where there's a will, there's a way. So I always say it started off with that. And so then my big travels really didn't start till I moved out of the area. So I officially moved out of the DC, Maryland, Virginia in 2015 when I got my master's from public health, and I moved to New Mexico. So I moved across the country, different time zones, didn't know anybody, just packed my Penske truck, and with the hope of having a good first career job with the federal agency that I got. So I moved there, but that's where I really learned how to do things by myself. And I think as a woman, especially, it was hard because I never, went out by myself. I never, even went to the movies by myself. It was always with my group of friends. And it wasn't until I lived in New Mexico where I figured out what self-love was and what healing really meant.
Where in New Mexico did you go?
In Santa Fe. I was in Santa Fe for 2 years, which is a beautiful town, but it was just a beautiful town in the sense that I loved exploring, but there was no nightlife. I was in my early 20s still. So remember, so I'm moving from a city girl to a rural state. It was definitely different.
Culture shock. You're looking around what do people do for fun around here?
Exactly. And the food, even the language, I thought, I'm really close to Mexico. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Mexicanos, a lot of Latinos, but it was, yes, there was a lot of Mexicans or Chicanos, but they didn't know Spanish. It was And so I was culturally shocked as well. I was like, wait, what do you mean you don't know Spanish? And it was like, well, it was really down upon to learn Spanish as a kid because my grandmother never taught me. And so to me, that was also like, wow, like I have to like speak Spanish. And through that journey, like I was able to, I was working with Centers for Disease Control and Prevention at the time, CDC. And so they deployed me to Puerto Rico for a mission. And this is when Zika happened, the outbreaks with the mosquitoes. And so I said, yes, of course. I was like, yeah, I want to be deployed to Puerto Rico. But what I didn't know was that I was really going to fall in love with the island. Like I fell in love with like the culture. Clearly they speak Spanish here. I, am Latina. I look Latina. So I was like, this is where I want to be. And so my 30-day deployment turned to almost 4 months and they had a job opening. Wow. I quickly applied. I got it. They moved me here. And the rest is history. Like and I think that's really where my journey of love for like travel started. But this Latina travels didn't start till 2021 because of the pandemic. Like I was working nonstop with CDC. I was doing 80-hour weeks and like being back and forth on the East Coast. And it was like I needed a scapegoat. Like I needed something that was not COVID related. And so I actually had Emily, like me and her just kind of like sat down and we're like, I need to start a podcast. Like I need to put my information out there, but I don't want to edit. Like I absolutely do not want to edit. I don't have the bandwidth and time. I was like, will you edit my podcast if I pay you? And that's how we all started. It was just like an idea. And I was like, let me start talking about each country that I visited. Like what would I want to know? And like that could not be easily found on Google. And so that's what it is. My episodes were simple and sweet. They were like right to the point. Like, okay, this is why you should go to this place. This is what I love. This is what I didn't like and how you can get there. And then from there on, like I literally just started building my platform little by little. And each year or each quarter, I have like different goals and different methods and have just been growing it ever since.
Now that's huge. And so like this background of poverty actually also seems to be a theme, not just with travel creators, but a lot of creators, man, whether it was travel, whether it was I wanted to raise my family a certain way, they nearly all, like we're talking to nomadpreneurs right now. And I also think Nicole about A Little Wild, A Lot Free. I mean, she had a health issue, but there seems to be this growing limitation that seems to be resources, mainly of money, but sometimes of time, sometimes of location. But you know what's interesting? You said this about Puerto Rico. Finding a place seems to be the magic. Those people like still wandering, like Jen Bethune. I think of the Bethunes, Nicole. Being Bethunes. You haven't heard of Being Bethunes, Bianca?
I have not. No.
Go check out their platform. They're big in the travel creator space. But they kind of backed off of that message, even though they have that same family, that same following. When they found a place in New Mexico, actually. No, Albuquerque, right? Just outside of Albuquerque.
It's northern New Mexico. I don't
New Mexico.
They're in Albuquerque now for the balloon fiesta.
You're right.
Yeah. But they were suburban family, sold it all, renovated a tour bus, seeking an alternative lifestyle, done with the 9-to-5. She's very open about like they were talking about divorce. Their kids weren't happy and they were like, something's got to change. Yes. And so they set out on this journey and have, renovated multiple tour buses, did a mini, one of those vans, one of those Mercedes Sprinter vans. So they've done multiple things and it's all to lead them 4 years later to buying property in New Mexico. And there's not a home on it. It's land, but they take trips and they're constantly going to rallies because there's a whole travel community, as you know. Just, it doesn't matter which way you travel, whether it's in an RV or a Sprinter van or by plane, you start to get to know each other in that space because you're thinking differently and you have different values at that season in your life. Yeah. So we love it and we love being a part of it because it does expand our own. Like, what are we doing? Should we move to Puerto Rico? Should we move? Here?
We've been looking at you. We told you offline. We've been looking at apartments and, we came there. So, and for those who might watch this later, we came and met Bianca because we were going to do the T-Bex event. We were in the WhatsApp chat. You suggested Emily, but then we met briefly there. We didn't even spend any time together at T-Bex. But I've been following you since that moment. I'm like, man, this girl crushes it. And so like, yeah, we visited T-Bex and San Juan, man. So we live in Lakeland, not a convention town. Both Nicole and I have visited Austin separately, but we both are like really enamored by Austin because it's got good vibes. It's got good food. It's health conscious, but it's also a convention town. So it's not too small, not too big, you know? San Juan is like all that plus Latin culture, which I spent a year in the Dominican Republic. I love Latin culture. I grew up in Florida, so I grew up around a lot of Latinos and Latin food. And that's just like tropical is just like home to me, you know? And so I've only lived outside of Florida once when I was younger. I moved back and then I spent the year in the Dominican Republic. I fell in love even further with Latin culture. When we arrived in San Juan, we're like, what? Like the convention center, the Centro T-Mobile there is like fantastic. Yeah. And the convention center was great. And the Discover Puerto Rico and the travel creator culture, like actually not just the travel creator, but the Puerto Rican
culture,
creator culture in Puerto Rico is fantastic. We're like, dude, this place has good vibes, man. So I'm empathizing with it. So real quick, what's your biggest platform? Your focus?
My focus, I would say it's Instagram, just because I feel more comfortable at it. And I think that's what the other thing that when it comes to social or content creation, like, you got to find like what your niche is and where you're good at. So I feel like my big community is always on Instagram because that's where I get like people to sign up for my email list. So that's where I get people to answer my polls or my questions. But the good thing about social media is that you can repurpose things. So whatever I make on Instagram goes on my TikTok, goes on my YouTube Shorts, goes on my Facebook group, etc.
And it should, you already have it, just cross-post it, you know, to these other channels, because that's another opportunity to work with brands or work with travel boards or whatever.
Yeah. And there's always different like niches. Like I always say, like for LinkedIn too, my LinkedIn, I would consider it pretty strong, but it has also different context because of my background, right? Because my background's in public health and I work for federal agencies. And so I have like a different aspect, but I can also utilize my travel because it's like, hello, at the end of the day, everybody wants to travel, whether you work for that federal agency or not. But I just have to preface it a little different, right? Like I don't post like all my reels on my LinkedIn. I'll post like just like my podcast episodes or things that I've featured.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. You know, you raised a great point. Real quick, how big is your audience on TikTok? I did not think to pull that up ahead of time for some reason. Is that a strong audience for you right now?
I wouldn't say it's so strong. Like, I guess number wise, like, I can look it up right too. I don't have it on top of my head. My biggest crowd or number wise is Instagram. And what I pride myself on my Instagram following too, like, even though it's less than 10K, I know like 80% of my followers. And that's something that I say constantly to people. Like, it's not about sometimes the numbers. It's really about like who your community really is. And since I was in the Latina sororities, since I was involved with so many things, like that's how, like, I kept my Instagram, like, before it was not this Latina Travels, it was like my name. I think it was like, I forget what it was, but I changed it and just made that this Latina Travels. And that really is what helped me, I think, grow in that sense. But no, my TikTok is right underneath. But what I love about TikTok, it's like not even about the numbers, but it could just be like one clip and that clip will blow up. Like I have like clips from like Puerto Rico, especially like rooftops and like food. And like, just because I don't have like that many, like, you know, followers, but that like reel itself will get like thousands and thousands of views, which is incredible.
You still can get great reach over there. It doesn't reflect your follower count because the content is relevant and you can pop off on there. I just really love your branding. And when you pull, you're so far ahead for some creators that are where you're at in regards to, you have a whole ecosystem already built up. So you have your brand, you have your email list, you have your links page, you have merchandise. I mean, so somebody can completely engage with you through all the business side that you've set up. So I was really, really impressed with that. So I'm kind of wondering like how you knew to do that, because there's a lot of creators that have hundreds of thousands of followers who haven't stopped to set that side up, and we work with them. But maybe, I mean, I'd love to hear like what kind of was the light bulb for you? Like, we got to make this a business and everything needs to be branded, and love to hear.
For sure. I always have to credit, I think, my sorority when I was in college. Like something
Oh,
as simple as that. But like, my sorority has a name, a brand, a website, colors, right? And so
Mhm.
when I started thinking of this, I was like, well, I need to brand myself. Like I need to like I can't just like I want to be the face, of course, of my brand, but I need something else. I need a logo, I need colors. So I also outsourced, and I proudly talk about this all the time. And so I outsourced and hired a brand and website designer who happens to be a sorority sister of mine up in New Jersey. And we had a conversation. It was like a 10-minute call to see if like we would work well together. And I told her like my goals and like what I
oh,
envisioned. And she came up with my logo, my colors,
wow.
and my brand kit. And so from there, we took it one more step, and I hired her to be my website designer. But everything behind the scenes, like when it comes to like the mission, the info, it was me. But I just, again, that's not my, forte. And I think that's another thing that we need to remember. Like we all are good at something, and
Mhm.
we should focus on that one good something. But it's okay to not be good at building your website. It's okay to not like be good at editing your podcast. So hire other people, outsource other people,
Yeah.
and that's
Mm,
exactly what I did. I outsourced a brand designer, my website designer, and we
mm.
worked together to build that. And from
It's a
there on,
good website. I'm sure we do websites for like all sorts of companies, but influencers as well. And I'm looking at your site. I'm like, I have no complaints. Your call to action is right at the top. The
Right.
logo's front and center. And then like this Latina travels. This is what I love about your brand. I know you know this, but I don't know if the public knows this.
Mhm.
Like on merch, every Latina who felt limited will want to wear that, right?
Mhm.
It's also a mission in its own title, right? Like Nike, like you have to figure out it's just do it. And now it's just do it, but like
Mhm.
what does Nike mean? Your name and your mission are
Mhm.
like one and the same.
Mhm.
And it appears right there on your site like that. So, dude,
Mhm.
you really do have it going on. Now, I
Yeah,
mean, you have a master's, you said, right? A master's of public health.
I do.
Why do we never see public health information as a content pillar from you?
So I guess in a sense I try to like put those two worlds apart. In the only sense of why I do that is because, I mean, I still work 9 to 5 in public
Oh,
health. So
I
I
didn't know
took
that. I was
yeah,
going to ask you if you were full time
yeah.
yet. Okay,
So I
keep
do.
going. I'm
So I
sorry.
do still work 9 to 5 full time, and I'm very open about that, like on my
Hmm.
platforms, because like I need people to realize, like, as much as I love this Latina Travels, it's not what's making my full time money, and
Okay.
and it's okay. I mean, eventually it's going to, but for right now, like I am passionate about public health. I do talk about in the sense like I do talk about public health in different platforms, like for example on LinkedIn, like
Mhm.
more so like I'll be posting articles, or I'll be in different groups when it comes to public health. But I wouldn't say like I don't mix and mingle it, but I also am very just cautious because of my job, right?
It's
So
good to
since
know.
I work
Yeah.
9 to 5 in still a federal agency, just not CDC. Like it's still kind of like, all right, well, you need to not like do anything that they can ping you about, right?
Uh,
But I am a strong advocate that you can do both. Like even though is
mm,
it easy? No. Like there are things that I have to take, time off for. There are things that I have to, just be mindful. But I feel like anybody, like I'm not, superwoman. Like I just looked for a job that had a good team that met with my, my alignment and then my purpose. And I think that's what made a difference, because before, I was working for, CDC, which is a great organization, but I didn't have a life. And that's why I honestly
ooh,
started this Latina Travels, because I needed a scapegoat mentally. Like I needed something
mm,
me mentally stable, because I was like, I can't just eat, breathe, and dream about work. Like I need to do something for my own personal sake. But now
mm,
I get to work and what's it called, and live a life balance that
mhm,
provides not only financially. I was like,
mhm.
I'm gonna stay to it, and it meets my needs, like not only as a person, but in my role.
Yeah.
So I would say that.
Yeah.
I love that, and I know you're speaking Nicole's love language here,
Mhm,
because she started her whole premise of Hot Mod Influencer Agency
mhm,
with helping single moms and families, provide an additional income.
mhm.
And can you give us an idea, maybe even percentage wise, what percent of your normal 9 to 5 does your creator life provide, relatively speaking? Like, I'm not just making numbers up. If you make 100 grand over here at your 9 to 5 and you make 25 grand, you know, it's about 25%. Do you have a percentage roughly that you could just for information's sake?
Yeah. No, I'll be right up honest. Like my full-time job is my angel investor job. So I would say that makes that almost makes like, I would say 85 to 90% of like my income. The 10% is the little things that I'm making with TLT from like gigs or merch and stuff, but it isn't that much. And I'm okay with that at this point in my life, right? Because I don't have family, like I don't have kids, I don't have extra necessities that I'm like, oh my God, I need the money. So I think that's the other thing that I started my brand focus, like especially this year, was like, all right, yes, money is definitely key, but because I have a stable income coming in, I'm okay with my 6-figure stable income, right? But now, like, what can I focus on when it comes to TLT that will make me money, but also like align with my purpose? So I will say that, like, I'll say like, yes, my angel investor job is still there, and that's what's making me my money works. But I'm also on the side building little by little.
Yeah.
What would it take? Do you have ambitions or goals to go full time, or you're fine managing the two?
I mean, ideally, of course, like I want to be my own boss. So like, I think that's what I think everybody wants that, to be honest. Like, nobody wants to work for anybody. So I definitely would love to. Do I have like I guess I have quarterly goals, and of course I have like yearly goals. I've never like thought and sat like, all right, when will be the year that I will say like goodbye like to my public health job. But I think the other thing is like, because I am a first gen Latina in public health, in the role that I'm at, like I'm so close to being up in leadership that it's like I don't want to leave that yet, because I know I can also be that change that is needed in those communities. Because I mean, let's be honest, like when it comes to leadership in public health agencies, like there isn't a lot of people that look like me. And I was like, and the big reason why I have stayed is because I'm like, I can be that change. I should be at that table. But I also know that if I want to, focus all my time on TLT, I do have to give and push, and that's going to have to be something that I have to talk to my partner. And like, if like the next thing we want to do is like, all right, if I want to go full time on this, like, are you going to be okay with meaning like, the works? But it's all about, communication. But for now, I'm like, I'm okay with working full time and doing this, and just setting like, those goals and those boundaries.
I'm so glad you're sharing this, because a lot of creators, everybody has their own take on it, right? But we have met many that have a full-time job and are growing this on the side, and it gives them something to really look forward to, an excuse to travel, an excuse to have fun. Content creation is fun, and it makes for an awesome release from like that 9 to 5, but it doesn't always bring in that kind of cash in the beginning, and it can take years. And I think we need to be realistic about that. You don't just jump into content creation and then like become an overnight success with any of it. Many people keep their job for many, many years, and maybe they never necessarily do anything with like long term with their brand, but it fulfills them. I think you're very like an awesome role model to the creator community by sharing that. So people are realistic about how to build, if that's the route they're going to go.
Yeah. I also hear your mission in your job too. You just said not many women, not many management looks like me. And that's important to you. Why?
Because I think for the longest time, like I've always felt like alone when it comes to like my job settings in public health, and chronic illnesses, a bunch of statistics like fall under women of color. And I think the best representation is the person who looks like that person. And so I feel like that's my biggest like factor. It's like, we have all these regulations and rules and funding that are being accounted for, but the people who are making these these decisions, you know, don't look like the people that are being affected in the population. And I think that's what keeps me, you know, going, because I'm like I said, I'm just like this close to the top that I'm like I can't just give it up now. Like I studied it. Like, I mean, I truly do.
And are you passionate about it, public health?
I am. So I am very passionate about public health. And I always just like telling people, like, you know, you need like, there's more. And I'm thankful in that sense for the pandemic that they brought like public health out, because I think a lot of people didn't know what public health was. Like, I think everyone assumed, like, when you go to school, especially in the Latino community, like, to be successful is to be a doctor or to be a lawyer or an engineer, and that's it. And clearly I didn't go the medical school route. And the biggest reason why is because I didn't want to be in debt for the rest of my life. I didn't want to have like $400,000 in student loans. So I went the public health route, but I learned to love like that aspect, because I was like, wow, like without us, there wouldn't be like, you know, control when pandemics happen. Like, you know, we were the boots and people on the ground when that epidemic happened. So I am very passionate about, like, you know, my role and what it means to work in public health. And I mentor a lot of, you know, Latinas that are in college that are studying this for that reason, because I was like, I don't want to be the only one there. And once I get there, you know, let me recruit more people. And that's in any, you know, setting, right? Like, even just like my podcast and my blog, like at first, when I first started it, like I was like, is there anybody that does this? And then little by little, when I started listening to more podcasts and going to more travel conferences and knowing that, wow, there is really a big, you know, Latino travel like influencer, like I was in awe, because, you know, everybody's story is different, but we all have like that same mission, and that same mission is to empower our communities.
True, Grant. Think about Crystal Felix. She's in the Influencer Academy. She's first generation Mexican. Right, and she is actually fighting the norms of her family cultures in a sense, because she's the first one to buy a house, not get married, and not immediately have kids. And go to college. And so she's like the black sheep, because everybody else did the very traditional route. And we love her. We say you traded in a husband for a house. Because she told me she was buying a house, and I was like, oh, what did you know? Where's your husband? She's like, no, I bought the house. And I'm like slapping my hand, like, how dare I? Like, I totally assumed that she was married because she bought a house, but that's just like what even I'm used to. People tell me, like, they don't just go buy them. So anyway, we love it, and we're seeing it more and more even within our own community, and it's so exciting. It really
and the thing that stuck out to me about Crystal Felix that parallels kind of what you're saying or adds seasoning to it is that you're doing things alternatively to a traditional Catholic, you know, assumed Catholic Latin culture. Now, immigration isn't. Your family had to immigrate for its own reasons, and that's quite normal. But she enlightened me that she kind of feels between worlds, because she's first generation. She wants to bring first generation wealth. And so she's looking at real estate as investments, but she wanted to do this 3-week trip. That was like a development humanitarian trip. And her family, on all accounts, are like, what are you doing? You know, like, why do you have a house? But at the same time, she doesn't feel like her gringo friends understand entirely who she is and what she's doing. So there's parallels there. And you know where I was exposed to the power of public health. And I love the fact that there's a correlation to people who have clarity of purpose like you do and their patience to build a business. And in this case, we're talking about a creator business. You're patient because you can see that there's options forming, because it's not about being a creator. It's about having a voice for what's important to you. Have you heard of Dr. Paul Farmer, who worked in Haiti as a public health worker?
No.
He was finishing his residency, and he's a total gringo. And I'll drop a link.
Okay.
He was in Boston, like in the late 80s, early 90s. And then all these stories about the tragedies of and he was a public health. I think he was a public health student, and he was finishing his doctorate. On the weekends, he would hop a plane and fly into Port-au-Prince, and just go serve in local clinics as a student, right? And then he would come back, and then they would be teaching the books and public health stuff. And he's like, y'all are out of your damn minds, because let me tell you what's going on the front lines over here.
Right.
And so he ended up moving to Haiti as he graduated and went between worlds, where he was training residency students at a hospital up there. He has an epic story himself, but he wrote a book called Pathologies of Power.
Okay.
And he dives deep into how public health is how the power brokers control the rest of the world.
Mm.
And basically we could have like life-giving revolution in specifically Latin America and the Latin Caribbean area if we could actually empower the public health alone. And so his writings are very powerful. And though I personally don't have a passion for that aspect of it, he really opened my eyes. Pathologies of power. And he was there before the earthquake. He was there back in the day. And when all the celebrities were coming in, he gained notoriety because they started just all consulting with him because he had been there for a decade and a half in Haiti. And I worked there for 7 years. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I worked off and on there for 7 years in a different capacity. But I have a huge respect. All that to say, I have a huge respect with how you think about it.
Yeah.
Because it's nuanced and it's passion driven. So then tell us about this Latina travel specifically. What is your highest hope for a new user or a new listener to the podcast? What do you hope to inspire in them?
Yeah. I just want, people to know that like I am, a proud immigrant, started from literally, I want to say the bottom, but now I can proudly say that I've traveled to 6 out of the 7, continents, and I haven't, I'm not broke. Like I'm happy, and that's what I want to motivate. Like I want to motivate and break those barriers that people might think, especially women of color who are like, oh, I can't travel the world. Like I don't have a partner or I don't have the money, and I'm like, no, like you can definitely travel the world, because if I could do it, somebody who like literally had no idea, no clue, like you can too. And so I think that's the biggest message behind, and like that's what my the first thing that you'll see on my website, motivating and breaking barriers so more women of color can travel the world too. And I strongly believe it. Like that's why I'm like, I want to not gatekeep. Like I want to provide you resources. I want you to have affordable guides. Like my stuff isn't expensive. Like and there's a reason behind that, because like I'm like I remind myself, like when I was in my early 20s, like I was in credit card debt. I was not in a good sense with my finances, but that didn't stop me from going places. Like there are resources out there, and that's something that I always tell about. Like, I mean, how did I get to go to El Salvador for free? Because I got connected with the alternative break summer programs at my university, and they needed a Latina speaking person to be the coordinator. And I was like, and I applied and I got it. And that's honestly what you have to do. You have to put yourself out there in order to receive, I think, blessings.
Well, you're inspiring all women. It's not just women of color.
I was going to say,
this little Grant, I'm like, I'm not going to travel there by myself. Like,
so what would you say to little gringas or Latinas who are like, hey, I can travel. Okay, I'm empowered. I've got money. Should I, as a female of any background, travel alone?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. I honestly think solo travel, whether you're a woman or a man, is healing. Like I truly believe that, because when you travel by yourself, like you're putting yourself out there, right? Like you're putting yourself in this situation where you're like, okay, I have to explore something new. I have to eat something, eat somewhere where I'm not like maybe comfortable with. But like solo traveling has expanded my horizons, has allowed me to heal in a way where I was in awe. Like I'll give you an example. I was in the Virgin Islands. I had just left my first 9-to-5 job, and it was like a celebration trip. And I was also grieving the death of my grandmother that I didn't get to see because it was during COVID and she was in Bolivia. And when I tell you, when I was there by myself in these beautiful beaches, which by the way, USVI, the Virgin Islands are very underestimated. Like these places are gorgeous. If you've never been. And I was at this beach by myself in the morning, and I literally just started crying, like tears, river tears in an ocean though. So it was like beautiful, but it was like healing at the same time. And I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do that if I was with, a significant other, or maybe I would, but it would be different. Like it's not. And so that's why I always tell people, like traveling solo really heals your soul, and you need to do it at least once in your life.
Is there a place that an inexperienced traveler should start or focus on? You've traveled to nearly every continent. Like if let's just take Nicole. Nicole's getting a consultation from the great Bianca, this Latina Travels. Nicole has traveled once to Guadalajara with people, right, Nicole?
Yeah.
And then she's traveled the U.S. fine alone and done her whole thing. She wants to travel abroad, but she wants to start cutting her teeth on where should I go as a solo trip. She doesn't always want to do that. She likes, and Nicole, just tell me where I'm wrong. She loves traveling with people, but if she needed this healing trip, where would you be like, girl, start here, you'll be safe, you'll be good. What's your advice?
Yeah. First I would ask, of course, Nicole, like, what is something that you would love to get out of this trip? Right. So is it something for like healing, or do you want to like be adventurous and go see something that's like, on a bucket list? So I would have to ask you first that, like, what do you think? Like, or do you want to just relax? Or do you
I would want to I have so many bucket list things or like adventures that I would want to push myself and like really push the limits on. So like crying in the ocean sounds awesome too. So I'd want to do like a mix of that and then go like, zip lining somewhere because I'm completely scared of heights. And so I do it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It sounds like a Puerto Rico trip, actually.
For real. Like, I was going to say, well, if you want a mix of both of those things, honestly, Puerto Rico is so beautiful. And again, like, I know people are always just like, oh, but yeah, Puerto Rico, mojitos and beaches. I'm like, no, there's so much more. Like, there's the Toro Verde, which is the zip lining. And I think it's one of the biggest in the Caribbean. And it is so pretty because in Orocovis, which is where it's located, you can get a beautiful Airbnb and literally disconnect from like the world. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Like just, and like you said, since it's so also very close to where your home is, like it's a simple flight. And there's so many like local like tour organizations here that it makes it simple, like to like put everything together in an itinerary. So there you go. You have like the beach, which you can go on the west side. I don't know if you guys got to go on the west side when you guys got here. Like those beaches are magical of its own. Like you can be there for a whole weekend and it'll feel like a whole week because the beach is just so peaceful and calm out there. And then head to the middle of the island, which is the mountains, and do some of the rainforest, do some of the zip lining. And then if you really want, you can head over to the east side of the island and take a catamaran tour. And those are fun too, because you get to expose yourself to like other people who are there traveling. And I think that's also the beautiful thing about solo traveling. It allows you to connect with people who you never thought you would meet. Like I met one of my really good friends in Ecuador when I was there for a school thing. We became such good friends that she invited me to go visit her in Australia. And that's how I was able to go to Australia. I backpacked 2 weeks with her because she was an engineer and they could take sabbatical whenever. She took a whole year off in South America. But when I went to visit her in Australia, she took 2 weeks off so we can go to the north of Australia. And we did the Great Barrier Reef and swam with turtles, did hiking. And so I would also say, I always tell people Australia is beautiful, but you have to be willing, one, for that very, very long plane ride because it takes forever. Yeah. And then two, the money. I mean, that Australia is very expensive, but
really
worth it. 100%. So yeah.
I didn't even want to fly to Hawaii. That's how lame I am. I'm like, I don't want to go. I don't want to fly that long in a plane. So I don't know if I'll ever even make it to there. That's why Puerto Rico keeps looking better and better.
I went to Seattle in January, and that took forever to get to from Puerto Rico. And I was like, I don't think I'll ever want to come back. It takes forever.
That took longer.
Yeah, I remember flying once. I traveled semester at sea in 2005, and we left out of Vancouver, hit a typhoon, were wrecked in the North Pacific, had to crash land in Hawaii. We were stuck there for 2 weeks, and then they're like, "What are we going to do with these kids?" And with travel, you're familiar enough with travel, other people aren't. When it comes to traveling by sea, the way visas work, like it's very difficult to come in by port. And so we kept missing our timeline for all these spots we had to stay. Finally, like, we got to get these guys back on track. So they commissioned flights. They flew us from Hawaii to San Francisco, had like a 12-hour layover, then flew from San Francisco to Shanghai. And it's a rite of passage. Like, and I think the thing like Australia, I've always kind of, when I fantasize Australia, all of Australia, Oceania, I'm probably only going to do this once, maybe twice in my life. And it's like, okay, so plan a month, take the trip, bop around maybe the Asian Four Tigers, and then take off. But like I travel by sea, and so we did some of that, and then picked up the boat in Vietnam, and then kept proceeding from there. So like that slow travel I was okay with, but the flight itself, you got to do it once in your life to be like, I survived 12, 14 hours in this freaking plane.
Is that how long does it take to get to Shanghai from like Florida?
Oh, well, it was 14 hours from San Francisco. So plus what, 4 hours, plus 5 hours?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh, it's a flight. If you go direct, but you could go east, right? And just do layovers. You could just keep jumping layovers east and eventually end up there. Okay. So real quick, Bianca, favorite place you've ever traveled to that's not Puerto Rico?
That's so tough. There's so many beautiful places. All right, well, I'm gonna have to give you top three because I
say top three.
Top three. So of course, number one, like maybe I'm biased, but my home country, Bolivia, is so beautiful. But if you Google Salar de Uyuni or the Salt Lakes of Bolivia, I kid you not, it is something out of this world. Like it literally is like heaven is touching the earth, and it has become very popular because of travel creators. So Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia, number one, like beautiful. Two, Egypt. I mean, Egypt was something that I dreamed about also. I mean, we learn about pharaohs, about mummies, about all the culture. But when you go to Egypt and literally see these pyramids that were built by man and see the mummies that are still there with their hair, like you're just like, I think that whole trip I had goosebumps because you are, you have the privilege of walking through these graves, walking through these like natural, like beautiful, pyramids that are still up in there. So I would say Egypt, and the food and the culture is amazing also. And then lastly, I'm gonna have to say Australia. Like, I mean, Australia was out of this world. Like some of the best coffee that I've ever had was in Australia.
What?
Yes.
Not expecting that.
Yes. It was just I stayed first I started in Melbourne. So Melbourne, and like I think if you Google it, Melbourne has like some of the best coffee shops in the world. It was just so good.
I heard Melbourne's on point as a town in general.
Yes, it is. It's a very fun town, and that's where my friend lives, and that's where she basically grew up. But we went up to the northern part, like I said. So I did the canyons and I did the Great Barrier Reef, and I mean, imagine you're swimming with turtles. You feel like you're literally like Nemo, like from the so it was really magical, and I would love to go back and do it for long. At the time, I could only take 2 weeks off, and that is not nearly enough. Like you said, a month at least is necessary. But if I go back, I'm hopping on to New Zealand because it's a must. But yeah, so I would say Bolivia, Egypt, and Australia.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. Nicole, any final questions for the beautiful Bianca?
Beautiful Bianca. Do you see yourself staying in Puerto Rico, or do you ever like consider moving back to the States?
Yeah, like I always tell people, Puerto Rico is definitely beautiful. It's definitely hard to live here. It's definitely, different between vacationing and living here. For now, like since my job is full remote and because of my brand, clearly everybody loves to travel here. I do plan on staying here. My partner, his job is stationed here. So until he gets a potential also move, then we're kind of, I don't want to say we're stuck here because I really love being here. This is home for me. But are there more opportunities elsewhere? Of course. But for now, like I'm riding the wave and just, taking it day by day. So for now, yes, I'll say I'm going to be here for a couple more years, but who knows? Because when I moved here, I said 2-3 years and it's almost year 8.
Yeah. Never know.
Dude, Bianca, I am really blessed by this, especially with your public health, your passion for helping people. Any parting advice or like startup advice for creators?
Yeah.
Especially solo travelers, women creators. What's your advice to anyone starting out?
Yes, I think my biggest advice is as easy as it may sound, but it's not. please don't compare yourself. It is so hard to do that, but trust me when I tell you this, like all of us, we have a different journey. We all also are on different chapters. While you may see a social creator or influencer and she may be killing it, she may have been already killing it because she's been doing it for 10 years versus you who are just starting it. So the biggest advice that I can give to somebody is just don't compare yourself. Start now. Like, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, if you think like there's 10 other travel influencers, like what you have is something different. So just do it. Like do it and don't compare yourself.
Excellent. And where can people follow you?
Yes, so I'm at this Latina Travels in all platforms. My website's thislatinaTravels.com, and I always say my DMs are always open. Please reach out. There's no such thing as a dumb question, and if I don't know the answer, like I'll do my best to find it.
Bianca, thank you so much. Everyone, check her out. Stick around real quick, Bianca. We want to chat with you. And Nicole, biggest takeaway,
man,
from this Latina Travels, man.
I really love that. My biggest takeaway is that you can find fulfillment in your day job. And it was very refreshing to hear that from a creator, because a lot of times you hear the whole like angst about, oh, I'm trying to, you know, get out of my day job. But like she's truly happy in both, although maybe she's going to grow her brand. So, and that her bigger vision is to help women in general, women of color, really expand their careers. So I was very inspired by Bianca.
Yeah, man. Well, everyone, thank you for stopping by. Please check out Bianca, This Latina Travels. Buy a t-shirt, share it with a friend, share it with your Latin friends, share it with your gringo friends. But please share this episode, because Bianca really is a truly experienced traveler who is not desperately, I guess, chasing being a creator, but really desperately trying to fulfill her mission. And inspiring people. So I love that. Thank you so much. Check us next week, where we have, I forget the gentleman's name, but this guy has 170,000 followers following his journey on how he's sleeping in his car, blowing up his following in order to pay for a home. Very interesting journey. Check